Hello there, fellow humans, or whatever the YouTube subtitles are going to tell you. Today, I want to talk about the IS-7 because a couple of years ago there was the "Don't buy IS-7" meme, and to be fair, it still has a lot of value to it. Now, why is that? Let's have a look. The IS-7 is a decent beginner tank. You know, if you're new to the game, this can be a quite okay tank to get into because obviously the line is quite consistent. The tanks roughly play the same, and so this can be a very easy line to get into the basics of the game. But if you're not a beginner and you don't have the IS-7, there is absolutely no reason to ever get this vehicle. I'll show you why. Now, I'll start off with the stats here, and first thing you obviously can see is that the DPM is 1,000 less than that of the 113, which is not really that good. Also, the 113 has heat, while this thing has not that good APCR penetration. While a lot of the other tier 10 heavy tanks have quite good heat rounds, which is, even the Super Conqueror, which also has APCR, has better penetration. So against other heavy tanks, these are going to function better because they have more penetration. The Alpha is 460, which is, yes, very high. Only the 60 TP has more. That's why they're getting spammed in tournaments a lot, because they're just capsucker camping and trading. Now, sheer velocity, also pretty much one of the worst here, except for the 60 TP. And also the accuracy, while it is not horrible, it's by no means any good. A 0.36 instead of 0.31 or 0.34 here, which isn't great obviously, but compared to the 60 TP, it's actually quite good. Also the dispersion and stuff like that, but compared to even a 113 and a E5, it isn't really that good. And what the E5 can do is it can also go hull down, and it can do that. Now, because it has 8 degrees of gun depression, the Super Conqueror even has 10, while the IS-7 only has rather disappointing 6. But it is a Russian tank, so that's how they do. The mobility on this thing in a straight line is very fast, but the same goes for the 113 as well, which is also a very strong tank. And to be honest, the way this works is if you're not a new player, if you've already experienced that the game, there is no reason to get the IS-7 because the 113 exists. It's just overall, when you know what you're doing, a better tank. However, if you're new to the game, then the IS-7 can work quite well for you, and we'll go into that why later. But obviously, if you're a more experienced player, I can definitely recommend the 113 over the IS-7. Now, the IS-7 does have the advantage of having more hit points, and it also has pretty much better armor, especially on the side. So let's take a look at that now. So here we are with the armor of the IS-7. That's pretty much the only thing that actually rescues this thing back into relevance. Now, the lower plate obviously is the weak spot in every tank, which just happens to be the case. Now, the front is quite strong if you angle it frontally, like this. You know, you can see 400 millimeters. It's almost impenetrable here if it is fully frontal. So that is the strength of the IS-7 right here. Especially also the turret is basically impenetrable from the front. But obviously with the 6 degrees of gun depression, you are going to end up exposing a lower plate quite a bit too much if you try to get shots. But obviously in a decent position, this thing is pretty much frontally impenetrable. Obviously, it has a pike nose. If you turn the tank to the side like this, the armor becomes weaker and weaker and weaker, and then eventually bottoms out somewhere around 300 millimeters, which is still very strong. Then the side of this tank is also insanely strong. You have spaced armor here, so don't shoot heat into the side of an IS-7. Don't try that. If you want to shoot heat, you have to shoot it up in here, because that's where it can go through, but that's where you don't need to shoot heat. So basically, if you have heat premium rounds, just shoot on the side. From the side you're going to pin anyway, basically. However, obviously, the side armor is very strong. It's also very curved, as you can see. So this is a very, very strong tank for side scraping as well. However, what you have to watch out for is obviously the plate here. Because if you, let's say the house is here, you have the back plate, and you're going to be shot in this section here. That's why this vehicle can use reverse side scraping, like this. But obviously in Blitz, the games are too fast and too close to properly set that up. So that's more of a niche thing that you can use. Now, basically what we have here is we have a tank that is fast in a straight line, has very good frontal and side armor, and that has quite a mediocre and disappointing gun. There are only a very few tanks that have mastered everything like a Chieftain Mark 6, for example. And even they do have some downsides. Now, this vehicle is best at just being there and being annoying, blocking damage, and just annoying people, which is why it's also used in tournaments quite a lot, because, you know, in stationary combat, this is one of the best tanks that you can have, because of the very good armor, if it is frontal, or if you're side-scraping. Obviously, if you're peeking like this, for example, they can pin the plate here if they're just shooting premium rounds, so you have to watch out for that. Now, it's not as bad as a mouse, for example, which is only there for blocking damage, and is even slower as well, so that is definitely not the case. However, obviously, in a more dynamic fight, this thing is going to break down quite a lot, and that's why I'm personally not a big fan of this vehicle as well. Obviously, I have to mention that as well. Because obviously, in a dynamic fight, which I really like, you know, I like to move around, take different positions, pick different angles, because that's a lot more interesting than just sitting in one spot. This thing can struggle quite a bit, because obviously, while the mobility in a straight line is very strong, the turn speed is absolutely abysmal, and obviously, once you hit the tank flat in the side, once you hit the front plates, or even the lower plate, you are going to be pinned quite easily, and with only 2,400 DPM, you won't have much effectiveness against medium tanks and also tank destroyers that are going to push you. Obviously, if you can outtrade them with the quite excellent 460 alpha damage, that works beautifully. But obviously, Blitz is a very confined game, very fast game, so it doesn't always play to your advantage, and you have to try to keep the enemy in a position that they can't really fight back against you, which obviously you always want to do, no matter what tank it is. Especially for a tank like this, because obviously once you have two people on you, they might fail to pen once or twice, but with the absolutely horrible DPM that this thing has, you just can't fight back much against that. Especially, for example, if you're up against the 113, which does have significantly worse armor, but just has a massively, massively better gun. So, there we go. Nice. 3 versus 6, which is obviously not very ideal. The Batshot YOLO'd and died. These two guys, I don't know, I mean, I don't even know how they died. I'm pretty much full HP though. And let's see what we can do. And the T4 is not interested in winning either. I mean, he's clanless, camel-less. That is not really great. And now this is where the weakness of this tank comes in. That while it does have very strong armor, it does not have the DPM and the accuracy or aim time or anything like that to... What was that? Where did that go? To, like, keep a fight like this going and get out of it. And obviously they have to bounce quite a lot of times to make it up here. And obviously most T10 heavies don't have that kind of DPM. You know, they're around 2,500, 2,600, which isn't a unique problem to this vehicle, obviously. There's no doubt about that, but it is obviously not very nice to have that, and there are tanks that just do it a lot better. Like a Super Conqueror, like a Chieftain, like a 113, where the gun has a lot more influence rather than the armor. So, and I just prefer that. But obviously, if you're a new player, you need that armor. And that's the important thing about this vehicle. It is an amazing tank for new vehicle, for new players. But it does get blown up quite a couple of times, and that is because the ammo rack of this vehicle is pretty much all over the front, like here and this. So if you get penned through the front, then you can get ammo racked fairly easily because it's right at the front here, and also at the back of the turret. So that is another noticeable downside, but it's not that you get ammo racked every game. It's about every 100th game or something like that, so it's not that big of a deal. Now let's get into the second one, and yes, I did get ammo racked, and no, I don't care. But what you should do is like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. Thank you for that. And now, the problem with this tank is that it is very bland. There's nothing much interesting about it. However, that makes it very good for a beginner. If you're new to the game, this can be a very good entry-level vehicle, because there's not much to do wrong with it. Because it has very good armor. It doesn't really have a good gun at all, but, you know, you gotta learn to shoot first, so the gun is good enough for that job, certainly. High alpha damage, decent penetration. It is gonna do just fine there. One thing they might have the problem as gun depression, but if you play a position like this, you know, you can hide the lower plate, and then you can also somewhat be hold down. Doesn't work great, but it works good enough. And that's some HE from the crossbow. And that's some HE from the 60 TP as well. And because obviously the turret is completely impenetrable, which is obviously very nice, and it works. The gun, though, is very, very disappointing on this vehicle. But then again, it's a super heavy in that sense. So that's the balancing factor pretty much. But yeah, I'm not a fan, gotta say. I gotta say, I'm not a fan of bad guns at all. Same with the mouse, same with all the other heavy tanks like that. I like a very good gun. Like that on a Chieftain, Super Conqueror, even a 113. I do prefer that style of tank. But that is obviously harder to play because they have less armor. They need to be played a bit different. And yeah, he's gonna try and YOLO me. I don't know why, but T92 is stock, which is a good thing. Premium penetration, do not disappoint me. It's only... I would use calibrated on this tank, to be fair, because it's just... the DPM's already bad, so you're not going to gain much by boosting that. So I'd rather use the calibrated and then make sure that the shots count a lot more. Okay, because then it's also easier to pen the IS-7 itself with premium ammo, which is very nice. Okay, now, the verdict of this vehicle is fairly simple. If you're a new player, it can be an excellent starting vehicle because it's easy to play, it's well-rounded in that sense, and has insanely good armor. However, if you're an experienced player and you don't have the IS-7 for whatever reason, there is absolutely no point in getting this tank at all, where there's other tanks that are simply performing better, that have a lot higher skill and performance ceiling, that are then also more enjoyable to play. Plus the bonus, you probably don't get ammo racked as much, but there's that. So yeah, that's the video. IS-7, good beginner tank, bad progression tank. And with that said, thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one. Goodbye.